Ooh, guys, check that out. Beautiful, delicious. Wait till you taste what I'm about to teach you how to make. This stuff is so good, you will never go back to the store to purchase another bottle ever again once you taste your own. Oh, yeah. Well, howdy folks, and welcome back to Texas Cooking Today. On this episode, we're going to be making a pale ale. Now, pale ale is delicious. It is fantastic, and if you've never had a homemade pale ale, guys, you've really missed out. Here's what I tell folks. The difference between home brewing and something that you go to the store and buy in a six-pack or whatever, something that's commercially manufactured, the difference between those two is like the difference between canned soup and fresh soup of the same type you make at home, or the difference between a commercially produced loaf of bread that's sold in every market across the United States versus fresh bread that you make at home. The flavor difference is substantial. It's unbelievable, in fact. And that is the same difference when it comes to home brew, okay? A, it's fun to make. B, it's delicious, and C, believe it or not, even though people will say don't go into this to cut costs because you won't. Actually, yeah, I did. I did so much brewing over time that I learned how to seriously reduce my costs on the brew that I was drinking. Basically, I got it down to roughly $12 a case, okay? After everything was figured in, cost, bottles, caps, all of it, everything. About $12 a case. Now guys, that's a good deal, okay? But that's not the best reason to do this. The real reason is it's just like cooking anything else that we do on Texas Cooking Today. It's producing something fabulous, something delicious. And that's what we're going to do today. Now, what we're going to be making, like I said, pale ale. And we're going to use the technique is called extract brewing, and that's where we use malt extract in the form of a syrup, basically. It's like molasses. This is the sugar directly from malted barley, and it's the exact same sugar that's obtained when you do all grain brewing. So this is a great way to learn how to brew. It's the best place to start as far as I'm concerned. So that's what I'm going to teach you guys. Now, I tell you what, let's take a look at one of these things. This right here, guys, that's right, that's the one I produced. See, I put a nice little red, white, and blue cap on the top of it. I use different color caps to indicate which items I have in certain bottles. Very, very clear, okay? I can see right through that bottle quite easily. And yes, that was pressure you heard. Home brews are carbonated just like any other beer, guys. But what we do in home brewing is we carbonate. I'll try to pour this up gently so I don't get too much head. We try to carbonate in such a way that's called natural carbonating. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm allowing the yeast in my beer to produce all of the carbon dioxide that gets pushed down into it. So every bit of my fizz comes from my yeast. Now look, guys, look at the clarity on this. It's beautiful, beautiful clear beer. The flavor, oh man, hang on. I'll get a beer stash. Oh, let me explain this. This particular recipe, it's a very clean, simple recipe. The flavor on this, very malty, and it has what's called a biscuit malt in it, so it gives it a somewhat cracker-like flavor. It's fantastic, and the type of hops that I use gives it a citrusy, zest kind of flavor. Fantastic finish, okay? Very clean tasting, like I said. And probably the best quality beer that you're ever going to drink in your life. Guys, wait till you try this. Now, tell you what, let's head on into the kitchen and let's get this stuff brewed up. Come on, let's go. Okay, guys, here we have our ingredients all set up. And if you're watching the tutorial, this is going to be comprehensive, guys. I'm going to get into a lot of detail here. And I'm going to give you a lot of the tips and tricks and techniques that I've learned over pretty much more than a decade of brewing beer. So what we're going to do is first take a look at our ingredients, and we're also going to be talking about the equipment that we use. There's a lot of stuff that's used in this, guys. There's the pot you cook it up in, the fermenting bottles that we ferment in, the tubes that we transfer liquid from one place to another in. As far as the pot you need, when you're starting out brewing, the type of brewing I'm going to show you, you don't have to have a big pot, okay? The smallest I would recommend trying would be something like this. This is an 8-quart pot. You can get by with making a concentrated wort in an 8-quart pot. I'm going to be using a 12-quart. You don't have to spend a lot of money up front to get started making beer. We're going to go on basic on this one. So I'm going to show you this with the very same pot that I learned to make beer with. This one, this is a 12-quart pot. I've made a few hundred batches of beer in this pot. Okay, so it doesn't take fancy equipment, it just takes something that's available and capable of doing the job. Now guys, come a little closer. Let's get a close-up look at these ingredients and what they're for and what they're doing, and I'm going to explain this process a little further, okay? Come on. Okay guys, our ingredients. As I said, barley. These are different kinds of barley, okay? These are toasted barleys that are designed for flavor enhancement. The kind of barley that's used for conversion is not been toasted. It's still left raw and what we call a barley malt. I have a product that's called malt extract. This amber looking syrup, okay, and that's exactly what it is. It's just like molasses, really. It's delicious and sweet, extremely sweet in fact, sugary. If I were to take barley and convert the starches to sugars and then concentrate it down into a syrup, bam, that's what I would have right there. That is what that is. It's taking a big step out of it for the beginning home brewer. Okay, so you don't have to worry about all that batch conversion. You don't have to worry about converting the grains. All we have to worry about is developing flavor and creating a beautiful wort, which is the liquor that we're about to make here. The soup that we're going to make is called a wort. We're going to develop a wonderful flavor. We have hops. Now hops in beers there's so many different ones, it's unbelievable, and each type of hop has a different flavor. It's just a little green leafy flower, guys, and the hops that are in these bags are what they call hop pellets, and that's where they chop up the hops and then extrude them in these little pellets, and it works great for home brewing. This is White Labs yeast. Now this particular recipe that I'm going to show you is dependent on certain specific brand items, but only one brand, and that's the yeast itself. If you want to use a different kind of ale yeast, you can, but I'm going to tell you it's not going to taste exactly like this, because every brand markets different kinds of yeast. They're not all the same. And they're very highly competitive, and this White Labs California ale yeast is perfect for this particular type of beer. I will be using Cascade hops. That's a type of hops that has a citrusy flavor to it, and it's wonderful. It's zesty, and it's also one of the most popular kinds of hops in brewing today. Amarillo hops, which is a relative of the Cascade hops, but higher in its acid content, in its alpha acid, and that gives it an even sharper, more citrusy kind of flavor. So we'll be using the Amarillo hops, and by the way, that's a city here in Texas, the name of it, Amarillo. So, but it's not related to that. Amarillo hops was called that because the hops are a little more yellow color, and Amarillo is a Spanish word for yellow. So there's our basic ingredients. We're going to get some water in here and get it heating, and I'm going to be putting this down in there. This is a thermometer, guys, and this is one of those things that you're going to need for good brewing. This thermometer goes up to 100 degrees Celsius or down to -20, or on the Fahrenheit side up to 220 or down to a little below 0 degrees. So you're going to need a thermometer like this to control low temperature things when it comes to beer making. All right, and the other item that you see up here, this little goodie, is what's referred to as a hydrometer. This allows a person to weigh liquid, essentially. You find out how dense that liquid is. And by comparing the density of the liquid before it has fermented versus after, you can discover the amount of alcohol that's in it. It's a relative scale. So, that's what that is, a little simple hydrometer. Back in the back here, this is a capper. We'll get into this guy later, but so you'll know, yes, you can take regular glass bottles and put those crown caps right back on them with a simple hand capper just like this. Isn't that neat? I'm going to fill this pot to the bottom of these rivets with hot water, and we're going to get on heating it up on the stove. I need to heat it to 160 degrees. Now guys, I have 3 different kinds of barley malt here, and these are the toasted type that add flavor and character and body to beers. The first one here, this one's called dextrin carapils. Basically, dextrin carapils, what this is a type of barley that doesn't really provide much flavor, but it does provide body, and it gives a better head to a beer. Okay, so that actually adds head to your beer. And that's a good point for people that are proud of their beers. They want that beer to have a quality head for the type of beer it is. This particular malt right here is one of my favorites. It is so delicious. This is a toasted malt. This one is a crystal malt, and the dark toast on this is called tin lava bond. Now, lava bond is just a rating scale for toasted malts like this, for these crystal malts. The last one over here, this one is what's called a biscuit malt. Now this malt, another one, I absolutely love biscuit malt, because biscuit malt gives you a flavor in your beer that's very much like that of a cracker. Now, so you will know the actual proportions of all of the ingredients that you're seeing here. In that bucket up there, what we spoke of earlier, that malt extract, that's 6 pounds of it right there. And guys, 6 pounds of malt extract makes a very strong beer. It's pretty close to a double, okay? So I'm going to have a high alcohol content on this beer, but it doesn't taste of alcohol, and it's really, really good. On your other ingredients, the quantities there, I'll be using 1 pound of the carapils, 1 pound of the crystal malt, tin lava bond, and 1/2 pound of the biscuit malt. I will be using for the boil Cascade hops, and I'll use 1 ounce of it. And for the finishing hops and flavoring hops, I'll use 1/2 ounce of the Amarillo on each of those. 1 full packet of the White Labs California ale yeast. Now, on our products that we use to cook this up, this little guy right here is what they call a hop sock, guys. And it's just a little tube, basically like a cheesecloth tube. And we put the hops down inside of it and tie the top of it. and it contains the majority of those little particles of hops. That way they're not all out and through the beer. All right? It helps you to get the extra hops out of your wort after you've boiled it up. There are other kinds of hop bags. This one I think is virtually useless. I hate these little mesh bags for hops. I think they suck rocks. I just wanted you to see one and let you know that I recommend not using that. I was not happy with those at all. Something else that works really well, and it possibly works better than these hop socks, is just a regular athletic cotton athletic sock. The other item that we're going to need is a grain bag. Now when you're doing steeping for grains and you're doing extract brewing, then you're not going to need a big grains bag. So this is a smaller size bag for that. If you'll notice up here, the mesh is really fine, but down here it's gotten wide. Over time with use, these will stretch and open up. Guys, this is actually a benefit, okay? When it does that, when it stretches and opens up, it becomes a very good benefit to being able to remove the part of this barley which will make the beer astringent. And I'll show you how we remove that quality. Here is a larger bag. This is the kind of bag that would be used for all grain brewing. And as you see, the thing is tremendous. It's large. It'll hold a lot of grain, guys. So this massive grain bag isn't needed for what we're doing because we're only dealing with a couple of pounds of grain. So I'm not handling 8 or 10 pounds of grain here. So what I'm going to do is get all of my grains down in my bag, and I'm going to start removing that extra chaff that causes bitterness. Now what do I mean by chaff? When they crack these grains, these things are kind of whole looking, and they look sort of like that when they're uncracked. When they crack them, it breaks them open and separates the outside skin from the kernel of meat underneath it. And what I want to do is to remove some of that papery outside husk because it contains tannins, guys. That papery outside husk on this stuff, let me show you here. You can see how that grows, and when they break it free, it breaks those husks loose. And what we want to do is to remove that. That's going to remove the tannins in that cause the beer to be astringent and bitter. That's a little known secret not many people know about, but I'm letting you in on it. And I tell you what, when you know that one, you get past a major hurdle. Now I need to check the temperature on my water. Now what we're going to do first is we're going to take this water, bring it up to 160 degrees, and I'm going to turn off the heat. And I'm going to take my grains, put them in that grain bag, and I'm going to put them down into this water. That will create a tea that is barley flavored, and it's going to be dependent upon the barleys that I chose. Now guys, we needed to measure out that biscuit malt. I have my little scale here, a 1/2 pound of the biscuit malt. So I'm going to take what I've already poured out right there. There we go. 8.1. I don't think that's going to make any difference. Okay, so there is our 1/2 pound of the biscuit. Okay, as we mentioned earlier, we have our bag here. Just pour my grains down in this. Now you want to put your bag, like I've done here, down into a bowl, okay? Otherwise you're going to end up with a mess. This is my Breus Crystal. And normally when I purchase these, they package them up for me in these wonderful paper bags. There you go, there's that 1 pound of carapils. That's the one that gives it the good body. Now we take the top of our bag, and I need to tie it in just a simple single loop knot, guys, just like that. Isn't that easy? There. Don't worry about it, that won't come undone as you work. I'm going to take this outside, but as you see in the bottom of this, that stuff right there, this outer husk material, this is the chaff. This is the stuff that contains tannins that make for bitter beer. So I'm going to go outside and I'm going to sift this back and forth. And as you can see how it falls out of the bottom of this, I won't do it in here because it makes a big old mess. It's better outdoors. But I'll do this for about 10 minutes at the most. Generally it's more like about 5 or 6 minutes, but depending on how bad it is. So I want to do that, remove as much of that chaff as possible, and that gives me truly a much smoother, mellower beer. Alright guys, I have taken this outside in that nice Texas heat and sifted it back and forth and got the vast majority of all of that out. Now I'm still getting little bits and pieces of it, and I could do that for probably another 30 minutes and just get tiny amounts out. But the vast majority of that stuff, which we really don't necessarily want to have in our beer, the majority of it is gone. Okay, honestly, this makes for a truly better product. So I have my grains bag here, it's tied at the top, and my water is at 160 degrees, so all I need to drop this down right inside of here. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of a secret when it comes to brewing. Sometimes you don't want to have to fish out something that's really hot, so get you a clothespin and be able to pin things so you don't have to reach into that pot. Okay, there's one of those handy little tips that came with years of doing this. I'm going to put this on there. This needs to steep, and it can steep for 60 to 90 minutes for this beer. And that's a long steeping time, guys. That really is, that's a very long steeping time when it comes to a pale ale. This is usually a 30 to 40 minute thing, but I like to have a really robust malty flavor in my pale ale, and that's what I'm going to get with this. Now I have this back here. I need to process it and get it down in there also. I don't keep that in quite as long, so I use it in a different bag. You can put that in the same grain bag, which is that Dingman biscuit, but the biscuit is robust and I don't like to get too heavy a flavor from it. Okay guys, now we have had this steeping for the last hour, and as I said, up to about 90 minutes is more than sufficient. Now have a colander handy. I find this really helpful because you're going to have a lot of water coming out of this, okay? And what I want to do is to remove all of the extra liquid that's in those grains. I'm going to give that a moment more for gravity to do what gravity does. I have already taken the hops, the Cascade hops, out of their bag and placed it in this bowl. As you'll see, they're just simple little green pellets. They have a beautiful floral odor. They really are good smelling, guys. Take your hop sock, open it up, and pour your hops right down inside. There we go. You're going to need that little guy tied off in a knot, and then it's ready to go. So you will know these pellets are going to swell up to about 3 times their size right now. So this will turn into a rather large ball. It's important, and this is something I learned over a period of time. A lot of people tell you to bring your mixture here up to a boil first and then put your hops in there. And I find it's handy to get this mixture, your syrup mixture, up to a boil with the hops, because the hops release an oil that helps to keep this mixture from boiling over as we bring it up in temperature. I'll transfer that again to get those grains out of my way. I now have this tea-like mixture and I need to put my malt extract into. Beautiful. I need to get this malt extract down in this. Now, by the way, we did get a little bit of conversion on those grains, because after I was finished with them, I could feel that it was quite sticky. So that happens sometimes. You get a little bit of conversion, or what they call partial conversion. And you don't get a lot of extra sugar that way, but it is sort of the beginning of a process. Now, once you get that malt extract down to a point, you might get some of that hot liquid in there to finish working out the rest. I have this with a high flame under it, and I just need to mix the rest of this into that water. And as soon as I get all of that malt extract mixed in there, then I'm going to add the hops. Now, the first bag of hops, that Cascade hops, those hops, that is for what we call the boil. Basically, there's 3 different hops additions when it comes to home brewing. And we do what we call the boiling hops, and that bitters the beer, as well as adding a chemical to it that the hops has in it that acts as an antibacterial. Then the other item that hops can do when you're home brewing, and this isn't done so much in commercial brewing because they don't have a way of doing it, but in home brewing, what we can do is we can use hops at the end of the boil, where we add a little bit 10 minutes before we end, and then about a little more 5 minutes before we end. And what it does is it gives an acid spike of flavor to this soupy mixture that we're making. And that acid spike, if I can cool this down fast enough, that acid spike will remain there. And that's the reason the major breweries can't do it, is because they're working with thousands of gallons at a time, and they can't cool it down as fast as what a home brewer does. Now guys, I don't have to be particular about my hops. All I have to do, and I'm going to grab the end of this, is to get it as wet as possible. So what I do is get it into my solution, and I work it back and forth. There we go, and that just gets it really saturated quickly. Now I'm going to let that sit in there as this comes up to a boil. And once it does come to a boil, I'm going to boil this for 50 minutes, and then I will do my finishing hops. And basically it's the same thing I did with this bag of hops right here. I will add half of an ounce 10 minutes before the boil ends, and then another half of an ounce 5 minutes before the boil ends. And then I'm going to show you how we cool this down very, very quickly. The method we're going to use is where we dilute what we've cooked in that pot with a bunch of colder water. And that way it brings the temperature down, thereby protecting those volatile acids that we add to it in the hops. And it makes for a very, very bright, clean, crisp tasting beer, guys. You'll be really, really surprised. Okay guys, it's only been about 6 or 7 minutes now. As you can see, it's starting to foam on top just a little bit. And this is what I'm talking about. At first, these things will want to boil over, so you need to attend them. The other thing is I wanted to show you how the hops expanded. Look at that. So 1 ounce of hops is a lot more than it looks like, guys. As soon as this breaks a boil, we'll take another look at it, and then I'll set my timer for 50 minutes. And guys, that right there is what we're looking for. Just a nice, gentle boil. A little bit of foam. Everything is going really smooth. Now right now I have my temperature on this set at about a medium, and it's doing really fine at keeping this boiling. And that's all you need. You only need it hot enough just to keep a gentle rolling boil like that, and nothing more. 50 minutes at this, and then we're going to do our final hops, and then we'll cool it off. As I already told you, I was going to tip you off to some of my tips and tricks. Now, one of the things I have on the end of my faucet here, I've already removed my aerator. I have a swivel head kind of aerator. And this is a screw-on fitting that I keep on there all of the time. And it allows me to go back and forth. So what I have here is one of those typical bypass Ys that you see for a garden hose. And I have it attached to some food grade vinyl tubing. Very simple. The advantage of this, when I turn on the water, I can keep this back the back valve on this closed to this other side, it'll force water through this one side, and it does a beautiful job. But to clear the hose quickly, you know, it takes a long time to get water out of a hose. I can open this other side, it allows air in, and the water flushes out quickly that way. It's a very neat little operation. So if you want something to make filling your carboys easy, this is a cool way to do it. Okay guys, we are in the last 10 minutes of the boil. The same way we did originally with our first hops, our boiling hops, what we call the bittering hops. Well, let's get that down in there. There we go. See it expanding. Now we're going to give that 5 minutes. I'm going to put in a little bit more, 5 minutes more, and then it's done. We're going to cool it off by pouring it down into some cold water. Okay guys, we have the carboy here, and it has a couple of gallons of water down there. I have a large funnel in the top of it, and my pot that has had the cooked up wort. Now my handle's a bit warm there, so I'm going to be using hot pads. Be careful when doing this, and it's really smart to keep towels handy on the floor in case you have any spills. So let's get this in here. As you can see, when doing something like this, you need a substantial funnel. Whoo-hoo, there it is. Had a little bit of a geyser. And there it is. Okay, now I need to get a little more water in here to bring it to the top of this lower yellow line. And that little line tells me when I'm at 5 gallons. So there it is, it's filling. At this point, it's a matter of being patient. And as soon as I get that up to that line, I'm going to take a mixing paddle and I'm going to stir it vigorously to mix the hot and cold liquids together. Because guys, right now, they're not completely combined. They're separating. And that sugar's going to have a tendency to do that. Now guys, these stirring paddles are too big on one end, but the other end works just fine. And sure enough, it's hot on bottom and cold on top. And I need to get those two mixed. There we go. Now I have a nice even heat throughout. And think of it is, guys, as this heat is upwards, I would say around 95 to 98 degrees, in that neighborhood. But it is not too hot. Okay, and that way I have cooled down that wort to the point that I've protected the alpha acids in my finishing and flavoring hops. And it is going to provide wonderful odor, wonderful flavor. It's perfect. Okay guys, the temperature on this has now come down and it's cool enough for us to inoculate with our yeast. Now, the package that I have, and this one is an already what they call pitchable yeast. This is already mixed up. Usually, if it's a dry yeast, you'll have to mix it with some water, and then you can use it. Okay. Now, so I get all of this in here, I can stir it up. There we go. I'm going to give that a good stir. Now guys, you want to do this and make sure that it gets stirred really, really well. That liquid needs to get aerated in addition to having the yeast mixed in with it. So now what I want to do is get the fermentation lock on this. That would be this little guy. You need to fill this up so that the water comes up on this, not so high that it tops that little tube on the inside, but that it just comes up close to the top of it. I find within a half of an inch of that is perfect. Now guys, you can fill these with water or with some alcohol. If you have vodka, that is perfect. Don't use a type of alcohol that you can't drink, because if it gets in there, you don't want it to taint your bottle. But at the same time, vodka, that's not going to hurt anything if that gets in there. So it's the same type of alcohol we're making. Guys, our beer hasn't been in there very long. It hasn't even been 10 hours yet. And look, it has this nice foam build up right on top here, and I'll show you. The width of that foam is just slightly wider than my finger. This is what they call a creosote, the foam that's building. Two ways of doing beer. One would be what I have shown you, where I try to remove most of the husk of the barley after it has been cracked, so that way I don't have that much buildup in my creosote. You'll see a little bit up in here, and this is some of those tannins and other stuff that I was talking to you about. There's also a little bit of particulate matter from the hops in that as well. Some people use a smaller jug like this with a tube on the top and allow that foam to blow out, okay? That's one way of doing it. Use the 5-gallon jug, let the foam blow off. When you're doing brewing and you don't try to get rid of that husk, you definitely need to use that blow-off method. Now up on top, our little fermentation lock is just doing what it's supposed to be doing. Let's get up on that. So as you can see there, right now, it's pushing up and out. And the actual happening here is it is pushing out carbon dioxide. And remember, we put that fermentation lock in there to make sure that no oxygen would get back down in that tank after fermentation begins. That way we keep a clean, sanitary atmosphere inside. Right now, there's not a lot to see in the tank itself. Later on, as this builds and gets a little busier, and that'll take a few more hours, this color will become lighter, and we should be able to zoom in close on this and see some activity inside of the tank. Right now there's not much to see in there, but when that yeast really gets busy, a lot of times it really gives you a show. So it's just a matter of time now, guys, and we're going to look at this time progression bit by bit as it goes. Okay guys, we are now in day 2 on this beer, and this hasn't been going a whole lot of time. So we're looking at roughly, what, maybe 30 hours now on this fermenting. So our beer has gotten kicked off. The creosote on top has gotten rather thick and billowy and foamy. Let's take a close-up of some of this stuff, guys. So as you can see, this foam on top, like I say, very thick and billowy, and it moves around. You know, it'll change its structure hour by hour right in front of you. It's in motion. We are kicking off a lot of carbon dioxide in the top up there. And if we take a close look at the carboy itself, you'll see a lot of motion in there, a lot of movement. And it's having a hard time focusing on it. So let me get it up here on that yellow spot so it can focus. And I'll zoom in some more. See there? Now, these are currents that constantly flow inside of a fermenter. It's robust, it's strong, guys. There's a lot of activity in there, as you can see. And what you're seeing, those little clumps, it's just little particles and bits of whatever was left after making that tea in the brewing, and maybe some of the yeast. So it's just swimming around in there. We're making beer. This is what it looks like. It's more activity than a fish tank. See what's going on in there. Look at that. Deep inside that fermenter, that sucker's busy, guys. I mean, it is really, really busy. Okay, guys, let's take a look at our beer. Well, the first thing you might notice is that the creosote has become thicker. In fact, it has been even thicker than this. It got up a little bit higher. So it got puffed up really, really good. Let's take a good close look at that. See how high that was? And it is still fermenting. We are in day 3 now. Okay guys, it has been a week now, and these things have had plenty of time to ferment. In fact, it's been about 8 days. So what I need to do is to get my beer from the original fermenter that it was in and get it transferred to a secondary fermenter. I have down next to me here on a pot sitting on the floor another large bottle, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to siphon it from one bottle to another. And in this process, what I'm doing is I'm separating it from a lot of the sediment that's already in the tank and getting it into a cleaner environment to do a secondary ferment. And the secondary ferment allows the fermenting to finish up, allows for clearing of the liquid, and it allows it to get just right so that we can prime it and bottle it. And of course the whole priming and bottling thing, we'll be worrying about that in a little bit. But for right at the moment, I need to show you exactly what we do to siphon one of these beers. Now I have here a little device, a little item called a racking cane. A racking cane is a tube. On the tip of it there is a cap. Now this cap is actually open right up here, if you'll notice, right up in here. That sucker is open. So what it does is it pulls liquid down into the cap and then up through the cane and off into the carboy. This cap is real important, guys, because this prevents the sediment on the bottom from getting sucked up into this tube and transferred to the other carboy. So you need to get the right item. And a racking cane makes it a lot easier because it slides right down into the carboy. Even the tall ones, it hangs over the side, and then there's just a simple tube that it's attached to, and that tube heads right down to another carboy, another large fermenting tank. Now on this one I have a lock on here, and this allows me just to clamp this down and lock it off. And it's been so long since I've used it, I doubt it even works anymore, but that's what that is. You can use one of those if you want it. I'm not too partial to it, so take it or leave it. In order for a siphon to be established, I need liquid to already be in my tube. So I'm just going to go to the sink. I'm going to fill this with water. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to insert this right down into our carboy. And I want to be gentle with this. I'm not trying to stir anything up. Now let's get a better view so you guys can see. So the first thing I want to do is just simply dispense that water right out into, okay, now I've got a colored liquid there in my tube. That's my beer. Time to get it down into the other carboy. I'll just set that in there and let it do its job. If you will notice how that thing has started turning dark toward the top and got lighter toward the bottom. What was happening there is that beer was starting to clear. Some of the sediment inside of it was dropping down. And of course you can see the color on our pale ale right there in that tube. So as you see, it doesn't look nearly as dark as what is in that carboy. So the carboy can be somewhat deceiving on appearances. Don't let that fool you guys. Okay, our siphoning is finished. I'm ready to get fermentation locked back onto that bottle, get it up in the place where the other bottle was, and then we're back to brewing. And of course, any time that we are doing fermenting, we try to keep that fermenter from being disturbed with light. I like to just dress them with a simple shirt. You can put any kind of a shirt on yours that you want. There we go. That'll help keep the light away from my beer. Okay guys, it looks like it's time for us to get this bottled up. This has been a couple of weeks now, and I gave it even a couple of extra days. This has turned, like I told you it was going to do, it has turned dark. Now, we don't have a dark beer here. Don't be fooled by this. When you see it going through this tube, this clear tube, you're going to see the actual color of that beer. Okay? Now what I have right here that I'm putting on this is just a simple hose clip. That hose clip is nice because it allows me to direct where that beer flows. And I can get it cascading off of the side. I don't get a lot of water or a lot of air mixing in with this. So it's a very gentle motion that I'm getting with my beer now. There we go, guys. There's your close-up of that beer. As you can see, perfectly clear on top, extremely dark. But of course, when we pull back from that and we see the color of the beer going through that tube, that's a whole different thing, isn't it? Alright guys, now I have our bucket of beer right here that we have just transferred from the secondary fermenter. Right over here, 3/4 of a cup of corn sugar, and this is a commercial dextrose is what this is. It's a real fine powdery dextrose. It's commonly used in commercial food works. It's also perfect for priming beer with. So what we do is put 3/4 of a cup of this, no more, exactly guys. And trust me on this, you don't want to tempt fate with this. Even a few tablespoons more will cause your beer bottles to explode. So this was a very careful measure for 5-gallon beer. Exactly 3/4 of a cup. And I've got a little over a cup of water here, about 1.5 cups of water. So what I'm going to do is bring that to a boil, and I'm going to put this dextrose in it. The dextrose will dissolve almost immediately, and then we have our priming sugar for our beer. At that point, we're going to just stir it in, and I can start dispensing after it's fully incorporated. Now guys, as you see, our water has come up to a boil. I'm just going to take this and put it right in here. This won't take but a moment. If there's any extra sugar in there that you want to knock out, go ahead, but don't be crazy about it. There, that sugar is fully dissolved. I'm turning that burner off. And there we have it, guys. I have my priming sugar. Now what I want to do is I want to give this a little bit of time to cool down. I want it to stop steaming, get down to a room temperature, so it's not going to mess with my beer or any of the yeast in my beer. So I don't want any temperature fluctuations going on. Something that needs to be said, when I go to putting this solution down into my beer, I'm going to have to stir it at the same time. Why am I going to have to do that is very clear. This solution is heavy. It's sugar water. It's very heavy. It's going to go straight to the bottom. It won't start immediately incorporating into that fluid, guys. What's in this dispensing bucket is much lighter in weight than this. It's filled with alcohol, and it doesn't have any of its sugars left. Okay guys, now what we need to do is focus on getting this into this. I have my bottles back here. They're ready to be filled and go. Stirring paddle, okay? I got that down in here, and this is a sanitized paddle. And what I want to do with my beer is to gently bring it up from the bottom and have more of a rotating motion up and down this way rather than round and round this way. So we're going to have to be real meticulous about how I do this. Now when I'm working this in, I've let this cool for 15 minutes, and now it is down to where I can touch the pan, and also I can put my finger into the sugar mixture. It's not hot. That sure is good and sweet though, yummy. Well, now my finger was sanitized also, so I guess that was all right to do. Otherwise it might not have been too good. So here I am working that liquid, and I'm going to very gently and slowly work this sugar into it. Now guys, be careful. We're trying not to get air into our beer at this point, but we have to get that sugar mixed in. Okay guys, now let's go ahead and start filling those bottles. And what I like to do is I will allow my beer to cascade down the side of my bottle, just like so. Now just gently shut it off as it comes up. And what I want to do is to make sure I have 1.5 inches right here. And I'm going to do that to every single one of these and get on with capping them off with our press-on crown caps. Okay guys, I have some bottle caps soaking in vodka. Now you can't reuse bottle caps, so you have to buy these new. But I put them in this just to make sure, even though they're brand new, I make sure that they have a nice sanitary condition, so that vodka provides that. On the bottom of your crown capping device, there's a magnet. Your crown cap will stick to that, okay? Now, once you've got it on there, let me get this up so you can see this a little better. We want to place this right over the top of our bottle and hold it firmly, and then just push down on the grips and kind of twist really, just like that. When you hear it pop, then just release it and it's done. That's all it takes, guys. Boom, you are capped up and ready to go. This beer, now we just have to wait for it to carbonate, and as soon as it's done, we're going to be enjoying it. Well, guys, there it is. As you can see, there's a lot of steps to making this wonderful brew, but it's very rewarding. The flavor that you get, the beautiful product that you get, the clarity, man, that's fantastic. You know, fabulous stuff. I'm so happy I learned how to do this. It's been one of the more rewarding hobbies that I ever stumbled across, was learning how to brew beer. And it crosses over to a lot of other stuff too. I also make cider, wine, a lot of things. And it's a fantastic thing once you've learned this basic thing. And frankly, learning how to make beer is the most complex of them all. Once you have it down, everything else seems simple by comparison. So guys, I would like to say thank you. Thank you very much for watching Texas Cooking Today. To my subscribers, I would like to say an extra special thank you to you guys. I really appreciate you subscribing. I appreciate you backing me. Folks, please share my videos with everybody you know so we can grow this audience and really turn Texas Cooking Today into what it needs to be. Also, please click the like button. That does help me out a lot in the rankings. Folks, one last thing I would ask you, please just have a good day. You guys, bye-bye.